Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the content patch for the 16th of December 2014. My name is TotalBiscuit with today's gaming news and comment. Coming up in the show, the spree-killing game Hatred, currently in development, has had its Greenlight page removed from Steam. All this and the OC Remix track of the day is coming your way right about now. Hatred, a forthcoming game by Destructive Creations, caused quite the stir when it released its initial trailer, which revealed the game was basically about being a spree killer and mass murdering hundreds of innocent virtual people. The playable character, who is simply named the antagonist, expressed his disgust for human society and his desire to kill as many people as possible before losing his own life. The developer clarified that this was not indeed a satire, this was quite literally a game about spree killing. This brought condemnation from several games websites, although it didn't really seem to hit the mainstream media. Accusations were made that the developers were in fact neo-Nazis, although that was since debunked. The fairly threadbare evidence of this affiliation was a like on a far-right Polish group's Facebook page, as well as a t-shirt that someone misinterpreted as Nazi glorification. Not exactly the strongest evidence ever, and the CEO of the company dismissed the accusations as, quote, fucking ridiculous, end quote. Not that this actually stopped any of the more ridiculous statements leveled at the game, including, quote, Hatred is the neo-Nazi hate crime of video games by playerattack.com. So Hatred looked interesting and then I found out Nazis are making it, that's digitallydownloaded.net, and many more besides. Some of the more high-profile websites thankfully refrained from going as far as to accuse the developers of creating neo-Nazi propaganda, although were more than willing to put out opinion pieces claiming that it was the worst game they'd ever seen, a playable genocide crusade, awful stuff. That was from an opinion piece by Polygon, incidentally. And I know what you're about to say. Hey, we get to hear TotalBiscuit rant and rave about how terrible Polygon is. No, actually, you don't. He is entirely entitled to that opinion. And he's right, because that's exactly what the game is trying to be. In fact, Nathan Grayson, who is a writer who I generally don't agree with, put out a particularly good piece on Kotaku about this, entitled The Kind of Video Game Violence That Disturbs Me, which I found to be very interesting and a good discussion of this. Regardless of all of that, the news is simply this. The game ended up on Steam Greenlight. It received a lot of attention, a lot of comments, and within the day was removed from the service by Valve. The only quote, the only explanation that has up to this point been given by the company was by Doug Lombardi, and he said this to Eurogamer. Based on what we've seen on Greenlight, we would not publish Hatred on Steam, as such we'll be taking it down, end quote. That is it. Really? That's all you're willing to say? This has been a very interesting month when it comes to not selling violent video games. And frankly, I could understand the position of Target as a family-orientated store in Australia after the removal of GTA 5 from the shelves. I can understand it. I will not condone it, and I have a billion and one reasons not to, as you've heard in my previous episode, but I can understand why they would do it. They at least have a PR reason of some description. It might not be a very good one, but it's there. Valve, on the other hand, is not a big family-friendly store that sells dog biscuits and Huggies nappies. No, it is not. It is a video game store aimed at, well, the PC demographic. I'm not going to say the hardcore demographic because it sells all sorts of games. It is the dominant market force in PC gaming by a country mile. As a result, it has huge influence on what games are successful and what games are not. And I have talked about the pitfalls of that at great length over the course of the last few years. I've been critical of Valve because I believe that you have to be. You have to be extremely vigilant with a company that has that much power over one particular space. And if they do slip up, they've got to be called to account on it. Now, allow me to explain why I believe that Valve is in the wrong. Firstly, it goes against everything Greenlight is supposed to stand for. The whole point of Greenlight is to allow the users to decide whether or not they actually want this game on the platform. That's why it was created in the first place, because Valve didn't want to have to deal with the pesky nature of curating its own store. And I have criticized them for that as well. I do not believe Greenlight is a good system. I think it should be shut down. It's really that simple. I think it should have been shut down ages ago, and I think that Valve is getting to that point, but it's a slow and rocky road in the process. As far as I'm concerned, if a game is not breaking the rules of the service and is not doing something downright illegal, which generally go hand in hand, then they should not be prematurely removing something from the Greenlight service without allowing the player base to actually decide whether or not they want it on the service. If they didn't want it on the service, they wouldn't vote for it. So why exactly make that decision on their behalf? Valve is in this very strange place where it says, oh yeah, we want to be completely hands-off because it's more convenient and it costs us less money, but sometimes we're not going to be hands-off. And then you ask them why, and the answer is usually a stone wall of silence, because Valve is legendary when it comes to not explaining anything that it does. And it has the right. We can always bring this up. It has the right to refuse anything and everything, but that doesn't mean it should be condoned. For instance, can you cite the rule, the Greenlight or Steam rule, which was broken with this particular title? Is there a rule which says there's a certain amount of violence we allow on our service and there's a certain amount that we do not? If that does exist, can you please explain the presence of Postal, Postal 2, Postal 3, and Manhunt on your service? Can you explain that? Now, you don't get to get away with the whole it's a satire argument with Postal 1, because that game was not at all. It was a murder game. It's as simple as that. That's what you do. You go around murdering innocent people. That's the entire point of the game. Postal 2, you can argue, yes, it's a bit more satirical, but that is still a game which allows you to piss on an innocent grandmother and then shoot her face off. Valve has no problem selling that. Manhunt is quite literally a murder simulator. It is a third-person stealth murder game, and in fact you are rewarded for murdering people in a variety of interesting and gruesome ways. That's the whole point of it. It is a snuff film in video game form. It is available for sale on Steam. So I would like to ask which rule is being broken here. Where is the line drawn between what is acceptable when it comes to violence and what is not acceptable? Because if it's you can't kill innocent people, then I'm sorry, you have Postal, Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, Grand Theft Auto, Hitman, and 1,000,001 other titles that allow you to kill innocent people. So that clearly isn't it. What is it? I want an explanation, frankly. What standards are they using to judge this? Because if it's simply, we don't want it on the service, then frankly, I would like to call them out for cowardice. What pressure did you receive? What market force is strong enough to say you should not stock this game on your service? Who exactly would be running away from Steam if Hatred was stocked? I imagine the answer would be very few. It is the dominant market force, and this, again, is not a store that sells dog biscuits. This is a store that sells video games up to and including the most violent games that currently exist. It doesn't even have particularly strong rules when it comes to nudity on the platform either. And that, if anything, is the big bad for game stores. That's like the one thing that they more often than not will not sell. Games with explicit sex or full frontal nudity. So where did Valve's backbone go exactly? What is their justification for removing this from the service and not even giving it a chance to be greenlit in the first place? And not only do they make a mockery of their own greenlighting process, but frankly, it's also somewhat insulting to the customers, to the gamers, that they can't make their own decision, that Valve needs to make it for them. If Valve was interested in quality control, then they wouldn't have opened the floodgates in the way that they have. It's, as I said before, they don't know whether or not they want to curate their service or not curate their service. It just seems to be a case of we're going to have deliberately ambiguous rules so we can do whatever the hell we want whenever we want to. And I'm sorry that is just not acceptable. Not for someone with that much power. When you take GTA 5 off the shelves at Target, I find it an affront, but you can still buy that game. And in fact, the place that you would most likely buy that game, either on something like Amazon or at EB Games, you can still do that. It's totally fine. Removing a game from Steam is significant in the PC market. That can be the difference between a commercial success and a commercial failure. It's the reason that Valve has been wrangling with the process of getting games on Steam for years and has been trying and frankly failing to sort things out. They can't seem to figure this whole thing out, and this is just yet another example of that inconsistency in action, that inability to figure out what they want to do with a service that has grown so vast and so powerful that it is becoming a pseudo-monopoly. It's getting to the point where people will not buy games unless they're available on Steam, and a game not being on Steam, in most instances, might as well be a death sentence for the title. So you're gonna have to forgive me if I am extremely wary whenever I see Valve make a decision like this, especially when they don't properly justify it, because that seems to me like they're making a political statement, and frankly, I don't want to see a massive storefront like that making a political statement in that respect. I don't care whether or not you want to call this censorship or otherwise. I feel this is worse than the GTA 5 situation, as I said, because the power of Steam is massive. Not being on Steam can kill your game. And this is not a company with a giant Scrooge McDuck-style money bin. This is not a company that sold 30 million copies of GTA 5 in a year. No, this is actually a small indie studio that is potentially being handed a death sentence for choosing to make a title about something that Valve apparently finds objectionable. And that is very, very concerning. This is not in any way an endorsement of hatred. The game looks pretty bad, I'm going to be entirely honest. It looks dull, the subject matter is puerile, it seems like it's trying to be far too edgy, and the chances are I'm probably not going to enjoy playing it. I will try it because, hey, I'm a critic, that's what I'm supposed to do. Chances are I won't like it. I'm already predisposed not to like it. I don't really enjoy the idea of a game that is nothing but running around killing innocent people. That sounds frankly pointless, not particularly enjoyable, and chances are I will probably feel pretty bad doing it. Yeah, there have been instances in video games where I've felt bad doing a certain thing. Most of the time, that's kind of the point. Games are art like anything else, and yes, they can evoke emotional responses, and yes, those emotional responses can be unpleasant. Again, that is the point. We live in a world where Netflix will happily put the Human Centipede 1 and 2 up on its service, and yet Valve won't even allow Hatred the chance to be greenlit, and refuse to give a reason for it. Now, I'm hoping that enough pressure will cause Valve to actually come up with a reason, respond to it properly. Are we getting to the point where we're going to start removing games from sale or not even giving them the chance to be put on sale because someone found it offensive? Because that seems like a highly regressive attitude. Do we believe that video games are art? Because if so, they're also allowed to be offensive, upsetting, in perhaps the most heinous of ways. I'm sure that Valve does not believe that video games cause violence, that video games cause spree killing. I don't think so. If they do, they're in the wrong damn business, because that has been debunked a million times over. Are Valve in the business of telling us what games we can and cannot play, what we should and should not play? Well, they've always had that power to some degree, but for the most part, they have not exercised it in a way that's anti-consumer. I think this is probably the most egregious example of them saying, no, it's not the consumer's choice, it's really ours. And as I said before, their house, their rules. But where are those rules? I want to see consistency. I'm very much on the same page with Adrian, the CEO of the Astronauts, the developers behind The Vanishing of Ethan Carter, who has certainly been a big proponent of free speech as of late. And he says, I'm not a big fan of sales platform censorship. Put in an offer and let the people decide. It's kind of like the freedom of speech. Let all ideas enter the market, then let the best ones win and kick the idiotic ones' collective arse. Absolutely. Goes on to say, as a reminder, while I express and will keep expressing my hatred towards the game, I never refused the game's right to exist. If a cost of the freedom of creation is to live with questionably competent isometric shooters with average graphics, okay. Absolutely. 110% on board with that particular attitude. Now, can I also point out just how ridiculous it is to repeatedly condemn this game in such a public and sensationalist way? If you actually don't want people playing this game, why the hell are you invoking the Streisand effect in the most egregious way I could imagine? Why are you making a martyr of a title like this? Why are you giving it as much attention as you did? Because, make no mistake, if you hadn't done that, this game would have come out and no one would have batted an eye. But oh no. This is a great opportunity to get some clicks. Hell, I'm guilty of that. I'm talking about hatred right now. It's a controversial topic. I think it very much covers a number of highly touchy subjects, such as artistic freedom, the right of stores to effectively censor their own shelves, the sheer market dominance of Steam and the responsibility upon their shoulders. The difference is that while I don't like the look of hatred, I don't want to deny its right to exist, and it will sell based on its own merits one way or the other. There are some games that I would prefer not do well, but at the end of the day, that's just my opinion. Unless a game is so astonishingly broken that to sell it would be anti-consumer, I'm not going to tell people, remove this game from your store. And those games do exist. They do. There's not a huge number of them, but they do exist. And yes, quality control is something that I've supported on Steam in the past, but this does not appear to be an issue of quality control. This is not a game that's broken. This isn't a game that Valve has even played. No one's played it, because it's not out yet. This isn't about protecting the consumer from broken products. This is about protecting the consumer from things that Valve apparently don't want you to see. I don't think Valve should be in that position at all. I don't think they need to be a moral arbiter. I don't think they're qualified to be a moral arbiter. And might I just remind you that this is a game about virtually killing virtual people. I mean, for God's sake, Smash TV is as offensive as this game. My conclusion on this is very simple. Valve should explain themselves. Valve should be consistent with the games that they allow and do not allow on their service. If Postal is on the service, then there's no reason why Hatred shouldn't be. They are effectively the same thing. Steam is not a wholesome family retailer, they sell video games. They should not be in the business of moral arbitration. I would expect Valve to be the ones leading the way when it comes to protecting consumers from ridiculous accusations and dispelling the demonization of video games that for some inexplicable reason continues to this very day. Unfortunately, it seems like they've chosen to go a different path, and I am fundamentally disappointed in them for that. So, let's see if we get a better explanation. I certainly hope so. Alright folks, there you go, there's my content patch for the day. Thank you very much for watching, but before I go, I'd like to give you the OC Remix track of the day. Something from Kingdom Hearts, I think. The remix of this is Tetrimino. The original tracks were Dearly Beloved and Simple and Clean. The name of this remix is Simply Be Grooved. It's a light-hearted fusion jazz arrangement of two of the more well-known songs from the Kingdom Hearts soundtrack. Enjoy it and download it for free in the description below this video, and I'll see you next time.